All right, it's good to see everyone this morning. It's good to be back. It's good to be back. It's a long way to Arkansas. Kessler and I drove, and Kristen and Woodson flew because he's still under 2, so he can fly for free. When we all fly together, it's about $2,000, and I'd drive. Kristen would rather fly. So we bought her a ticket. She flew, and the crazy part, just before we get into our class, I left Thursday morning. Kessler and I loaded up, got in my truck. We drove to my brother's, stayed at his house Thursday night, and we got up Friday morning, had breakfast, got on the road, and Kristen, her plane, departed from Atlanta around 10:30 Eastern time. You're going from Eastern to Central here. So her plane departed Friday around 10:30. She texted me and said, hey, we're taking off. And so I was getting into Little Rock right at 11 o'clock. And Little Rock is small, if you've ever been through there, a smaller city. Anyway, I'm going, bypasses and all this kind of stuff through Little Rock, and I look up in the distance, it's almost 11 o'clock, and I see this plane coming in for a landing, and I could see the blue bottom of the plane. I knew it was a Delta plane. And about 2 minutes after I saw that plane, I pulled up my phone, and I'm at the airport, and I've been trying to track Kristen this whole time, and all of a sudden her tracking turned back on, meaning she turned off her airplane mode. So my point to you is I left on Thursday, and she left on Friday, and I'm convinced that was her plane I saw. And so I'm coming into Little Rock, and she's flying into Little Rock, and here we just joined together in Little Rock, and I'm pretty sure that was her plane landing. It was a pretty cool experience. But anyway, we spent a week with my parents. They're doing great. Thank you for asking. And I appreciate Greg, who was here, got up and left. I guess he doesn't want to hear chapter 11. But I appreciate him teaching chapter 10. And so if you were here with Greg and he went through chapter 10, I'm not going to back up at all, except to make one small observation that I made reading chapter 10. And Greg pointed this out, the verse, but I want to make a connection in your mind, and it really helps us again see the character of Joshua. But before we get to chapter 11, chapter 10, so Joshua has done a lot of work conquering the land of Canaan. Joshua is the leader. He's the military leader. He's the military strategist. He's a warrior. And he's been conquering all these cities. We've looked at Jericho and Ai and all these cities. And in chapter 10, he just defeated these 5 kings and these armies. And you get to verse 42. All these kings and their land Joshua took at one time because the Lord God of Israel fought for Israel. That's an important verse, because if you back up to verse 40, it says, so Joshua conquered all the land. So there are moments where the Bible in Joshua tells us that Joshua conquered the land, or Joshua did this, or Joshua did that. And although he is the leader, he is the commander, he is the warrior, he is Israel's leader, he is doing these things, but it's really God who is enabling and allowing him to do these things. And so here's a comparison I would like to make for you. He does not have the attitude or the mindset of someone like Nebuchadnezzar, who, when Nebuchadnezzar looked up and he saw his kingdom, and Nebuchadnezzar said, look at what I've done. Look at what I've built. Look at what I've done. And because of that pride and that mindset, God takes Nebuchadnezzar, and he's out in the pasture and he eats grass like a cow, because Nebuchadnezzar was lifted up with pride And so God brings him down and abases him and humbles him. And so just compare the two here. So Joshua does all these great things, defeats all these great armies. And Joshua could easily have the mindset, look at all that I've done, look at all that I've conquered, look at all that I've accomplished. But he doesn't. He doesn't ever lift himself up to that position because he knows, at least it seems, it doesn't say, but it seems that Joshua continues to know that he may be Israel's leader, but Jehovah is Israel's God. And it's because of God that Joshua is even able to do these things. So notice just the two differences in Joshua and Nebuchadnezzar there. But then we get into chapter 11. We have more war, more killing, more conquering. But at the end of chapter 11, you will have a phrase that all the war will come to a cease. It will stop. And it's hard for me, and I assume it's difficult for you, to picture all of this war and conquering that is taking place. A lot of lives being lost, taken by the edge of the sword, people being hung, kings being hung, cities being burned. I know it's difficult for us to put ourselves into a position where we understand this or visualize it and understand why it had to take place. And you have to remember, and this is just this is very much just scratching the surface, not a deep dive into why, but you have to remember that these people were pagans, they were idolatrous, they worshipped false gods, they rejected Jehovah God, they were given time to repent, they were warned to repent, they refused to repent, and because of that, now God is going to drive them out with Israel. Israel is going to conquer the land and drive out these idolatrous nations, with the exception of some, like Rahab, who, because of her faith in a God she did not know, but because of her faith, she will be spared. And but chapter 11, we have more kings. Now, Joshua 10 was the south side of the land. It was the southern land. So they've crossed, if you can picture in your mind, I don't have a map behind me, but if you can picture in your mind the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River that flows down into the Dead Sea, and they've gone from the eastern side of the Jordan, and now they've crossed over to the western side of the Jordan, and so now they are between the Jordan and the Mediterranean Sea, and so this is the land, part of it. They've also inherited the eastern side, some of the nations or some of the tribes. But they are now between the Jordan and the Mediterranean, and so they've conquered in chapter 10 the southern region of that land. And now in chapter 11, they are going north, and they will war against the kings of the northern territory. And so just note that in your mind or in your Bible there, that they are going from south to north here and conquering the land on the north. And once that is done, where else is there to go? You've gone from north to south. That's the war will cease for a while here. Joshua chapter 11, let's just glance at verses 1 through 4. There's kings here, just take note of the northern kings. A lot of names, a lot of places that I struggle with pronouncing. You may not, someone else may not, but I do. Chapter 11, and it came to pass when Jabin, king of Hazor, heard these things. And I'll make a note of this one more time because I've noted it as we've gone through the book of Joshua. It's interesting that after a major event or a war or a city being conquered or something major happening, how the news of it spreads throughout the land. And so we see and grand things that God is doing with Israel, and when it happens or whenever said event takes place, then the news of it spreads to the other cities and the other kings, and the Bible often told us that these kings and the people have been afraid, the fear entered their hearts, or the hope left them, or they, some kind of other phrase to describe to us that they feared the Israelites and the Israelites God, because you have to remember they are pagans. They worship idols these gods have never done anything for them. They've begged and pleaded to their gods, and their gods never done anything. And so now they're hearing about these Israelites and their God, and how God has allowed them to cross the Red Sea and allowed them to cross the Jordan and to take these strongholds and these cities like Jericho. And they're conquering all these cities. And so how would you feel if you were a king, if you were a citizen of these cities? And so we get back to verse 1. News of it has gone to this king of the north. And so now he's going to rally some other kings in the north. 3 are mentioned by name, and then it just kind of a blanket statement says that other kings were involved as well. Going back to verse 1, that he sent to Joab, king of Madon. I throw this out there not because I believe it's accurate, but some have suggested, just to note, that Madon, however you say that, this is northern, not far from the Sea of Galilee in the northern area, is the area that Jesus sat on a hill or a mountain and delivered his Sermon on the Mount, that is that area. I don't know if that's true. No one can really prove for sure, but it just has been suggested. But you have this king, so he has sent to Joab, king of Madon, to the king of Shimron, to the king of, definitely not going to try to pronounce that one. So those are 3 kings, well, at least one's mentioned by name, but king of this area, territory. Verse 2, and to the kings who were from the north. So there were more involved. In the mountains, in the plain south, in the lowland, in the heights of Dor on the west, to the Canaanites in the east. So really, you just have a description here of these kings that were summoned and rallied together to fight against Joshua and Israel. Now, in just a moment, verse 4, we're going to read how large these armies, when put together, were. So you have all these kings in the north rallying together. Verse 3, to the Canaanites in the east and in the west, the Amorite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, the Jebusite in the mountains, and the Hivite below Hermon in the land of Mizpah. So they went out, they and all the armies with them, as many people as the sand that is on the seashore in multitude, with very many horses and chariots. Focus on verse 5 there, or verse 4. Notice the description, at least the inspired description, that their armies went out, and they were as many as the sand on the seashore. You've been to the seashore, right? You've been to the beach, and you've walked on it. And, I mean, the sand that just goes as far this way. Chris and I lived on the beach, and as far as that way. And it seemed like we had about a pound of sand that lived in our car and in our house, because you take it back with you. You probably, even in Georgia, if you go to the beach and you come back home, you probably brought sand back with you. Notice the description here that the armies were as much as the sand on the seashore. Now, I'm going to read something to you, and let me remind you, he is not inspired. He's a historian. So this is Josephus. This is his work. He's a historian. Most of the time, he's pretty good. He's pretty accurate. There are times that he contradicts himself. There are times where many who study him, not me, but I do read some of his stuff, there are times where people suggest that he adds to some of his accounts, but he's just a historian. But Josephus actually writes about the armies that gathered to war against Israel. And again, I'm just throwing it out there for you to think about it. Even if he's not accurate, even if he's not right in the numbers, it still gives you an idea of how large these armies were that are going against Israel. And so just consider what Josephus says here. He says, now the number of the whole army, these armies that went against Israel, was 300,000 armed footmen, 10,000 horsemen, and 20,000 men with chariots. Let me read it one more time. Again, not inspired. This is simply Josephus, a historian. He says the whole army was 300,000 footmen, 10,000 horsemen, and 20,000 men with chariots. So we go back to 4 and consider it one more time, because we are told that there are a lot of horses. Verse 4, so they went out, they and all their armies with them, as many people as the sand that is on the seashore, in multitude, with very many horses and chariots. Josephus suggested that there were 20,000 men on chariots. Maybe, maybe not. That's still a lot. So this army has rallied together, and they're going against Israel. Now, in verse 5 and following, we're going to read their plan, what to do with the horses. And it's pretty gruesome, or at least if you think about the details, and if you're an animal lover, many people who try to disprove the Bible, they like to go to this text and show the animal brutality that took place here. But again, it is war. Verse 5, and when all these kings had met together, they came and camped together at the waters of Merom, and to fight against Israel. But the Lord said to Joshua, now remember, as we read verse 6, multiple times throughout the book, right before Joshua is about to go and fight against an army, or there's a major event in the life of Joshua and Israel, it seems that God almost every time, at least what's recorded, comes to Joshua and tells him the same thing. Don't be afraid. It's not something that God said to Joshua in Joshua chapter 1 and never repeated it afterwards. We read it 3 times in Joshua 1. Joshua records that God said, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Joshua chapter 1. Joshua 1 verse 9 is one of my favorite verses. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid. The Lord your God goes with you wherever you go. Right? So it's not something that God repeated one time, but he continues to repeat it to Joshua over and over and over, telling Joshua, don't be afraid. Because if I'm Joshua, and I don't even hold a candlestick to Joshua, but if I'm Joshua leading the men of Israel to war against 300,000 footmen, 10,000 other men, and 20,000 men on chariots, that's intimidating. But then you have the reassurance of God coming to Joshua. Verse 6, and God said to Joshua, don't be afraid of them. Don't be afraid of them. For tomorrow about this time I will deliver all of them slain before Israel. Here's what you will do to the horses. You shall hamstring their horses and burn their chariots with fire. That idea of hamstring their horses, I heard as I was reading and studying, some other men that I was reading described it as hawking the hamstring. So basically it's right above the hoof, their lower leg. You slice the tendon, which disables the horse. And so if you think about this ancient time period with these armies, they don't have tanks. The horses were pretty much the tanks. The chariots were the tanks. They were the transportation. They were They enabled the army to deliver more deadly force and blood, and they were an advantage to any army. And so if you disable and cripple the horses, now you still have a lot of men, but you've taken out a lot of their power. And so they are to hamstring the horses. Now, here's something else I'll throw out there just to consider. Some suggest that this is quite brutal, and it is, because all of these horses died. Well, that might be true too. There's two different arenas of thought on this, and we don't know enough. Presumably, they all died. But there's two arenas of thought from men and other commentators that I read. Some suggested that it did not kill the horse, it disabled them, and they were able to use the horses domestically, just not in war. So it really just took the horses out of war, and they were able to survive and use them domestically. Others suggest that in that area of the horse, when you cut it, that there's a major artery that runs up and down the leg, and once you sever the hamstring there on the horse, it also severs that major artery on the horse, and the horse then bleeds out. And so two arenas of thought. So some suggest the horses lived, they were just disabled from the war. Others suggest that the horses died. Doesn't really matter. It's just something to think about. Either way, they are eliminating the horses, whether they died or they lived. They are disabling the horses and the men on the chariots. They're cutting the hamstring, and they're burning the chariots. Verse 7. So Joshua and all the people of war with him came against them suddenly by the waters of Merom, and they attacked them, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of Israel, who defeated them and chased them to great Sidon, to the brook. And then let's drop down to the brook. Well, I don't know how to say the brook. And to the valley of Mizpah, eastward, they attacked them until they left none of them remaining. So everyone died. This large, unnumbered as the sand of the seashore army all died. So Joshua did to them as the Lord had told him. He hamstrung their horses, so they did it. They burned their chariots with fire. I would assume all the horses died. Just two arenas of thought. But verse 10. Joshua turned back at that time and took Hazor, and struck its king with the sword. For Hazor was formerly the head of all those kingdoms, so he was a quite important king. And they struck all the people who were in it with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying them. There was none left breathing. Then he burned Hazor with fire. Now they will destroy Hazor. Don't know how to say it. I don't know if anyone really does. But they will not destroy the other cities. And so that's what I'm trying to get to in my notes, so that you understand. They will destroy this city, but not the other cities. And so notice a couple of things. Verse 12. So all the cities of these kings and all their kings Joshua took and struck with the edge of the sword. He utterly destroyed them, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded. But as for the cities that stood on their mounds, Israel burned none of them. And we'll read in just a moment from Deuteronomy. Burned none of them, except Hazor only, which Joshua burned. And all the spoil of these cities and the livestock the children of Israel took as booty for themselves. And they struck every man with the edge of the sword until they had destroyed them, and they left none breathing. And so they did destroy Hazor, the city, and they burned it. Joshua burned it, it says, but the others they did not. The other cities they did not destroy or burn. The ones on the mounds, the higher cities, the elevated cities, Israel burned none of them. And if we turn to Deuteronomy chapter 6, we'll read why. But let me ask you this. If you were Joshua, and if you are Israel, and you are conquering a land, and if you burn every single city, then what do you have to do in return? If you burn everything, then what do you have to do to live in it? You have to rebuild. You have to rebuild. So, logically, that doesn't make a lot of sense. There may be more to it, but God does not command that they destroy everything. There are some cities that they left remaining to be inhabited. So let's notice Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 10. So it shall be when the Lord your God brings you into the land of which he swore to your fathers. Now this is the land of Canaan that we're currently reading. Israel conquering, taking with Israel. This is it being fulfilled in Joshua. When he brings you into the land which he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you a land, large and beautiful cities, or to give you large and beautiful cities, which you did not build. Houses full of all good things, which you did not fill, hewn out of wells, hewn out wells which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant. When you have eaten and are full, then beware. So they're going to inhabit some of these cities, and they're going to, for lack of a better phrase, they're going to reap the work, the benefits that someone else built, harvested, wells that someone else dug, vineyards that someone else planted. They're going to inhabit the land in these cities. Now, there's a warning before we leave Deuteronomy chapter 6. There's always a warning because they are in a pagan land, idol worshipers. There's always a warning from God to Israel. Verse 12, then beware, lest you forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. You shall fear the Lord your God and serve him, and you shall take oaths in his name. You shall not go after other gods, the gods of the peoples who are all around you, for the Lord your God is a jealous God among you, lest the anger of the Lord your God be aroused against you and destroy you from the face of the earth. And so in Deuteronomy 6, we see that they were told, at least not to destroy all the cities, or at least that they would inhabit them. And we see that coming to fruition here as they destroy one city but not the others. And they take the livestock and they take the riches and the booty for themselves. And verse 15, picking back up, and the Lord, as the Lord had commanded Moses his servant, so Moses commanded Joshua, and so Joshua did. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord had commanded Joshua. And so I find it interesting there as we read that we're going all the way back to some things that God commanded Moses, and Moses had commanded Joshua. Now Moses is gone and dead, but all of these things that God even spoke to Moses and Moses to Joshua, now Joshua is still fulfilling and obeying those instructions. Now, verses 16 and following, we have it's like a summary of Joshua's conquest. It's not detailed like others. It's just a smaller summary of some things that Joshua did. Something interesting, maybe you've never noticed, and I didn't really notice until I studied Joshua more in detail. But we'll get to there in just a moment. But Verse 16. Thus Joshua took all this land, the mountain country, all the south, all the land of Goshen, the lowland, and the Jordan plain, the mountains of Israel and its lowlands, from Mount Halak, and the ascent to Seir. Let's drop down. So you have a summary here. Joshua made war, verse 18. Joshua made war a long time with all these kings. There was not a city that made peace with the children of Israel except who? Who? Yeah, the Gibeonites, right? There was not a city that made peace with the children of Israel except the Hivites, the inhabitants of Gibeon. But they tried to deceive them, and that didn't work out well. All the others they took in battle. So that's a good summary there. No one made peace with Israel. They all tried to fight them. They all lost. For it was of the Lord to harden their hearts that they should come against Israel in battle, that he might utterly destroy them, and that they might receive no mercy, but that he might destroy them as the Lord had commanded Moses. Now, here's something that's interesting to note. And at that time, Joshua came and cut off the Anakim from the mountains, from Hebron, all right, you got some names here, but we're going to focus on the Anakim. Anybody know who that is? The giants. What giants in particular? Which ones? They were giants. Sure were. Let's go to Numbers chapter 13. Numbers chapter 13 is Moses selecting 12 spies, sending the 12 spies into the land of Canaan, the land that they are currently conquering. This time, in Numbers 13, the spies go. Joshua is one of them. Caleb is the other faithful. They go, they spy out the land. As Brother Garner mentioned, the Anakim are giants. Specifically, they are the giants that were in the land when the 12 spies went to spy out the land. Because you have to think, if the 12 spies in Numbers 13 went into the land to spy it out, and they came back and they gave a bad report to Israel, and Israel believed the 10 spies, not the 2, but the 10, and because of their disbelief in God, because of that, God said, for every day that the spies were in the land, spying out the land, you will spend 1 year in the wilderness. So they spent 40 days spying out the land. Because of that, Israel wanders for 40 years. So then you have to wonder, well, where are the giants that originally were there as the spies went into the land, and they were so large, and they terrified the 10 unfaithful, unbelieving spies that came back to Israel. Well, here they are. This is them. If we go again, I'm still in Numbers 13. If we read 32 and 33, this is the report that the 10 unfaithful spies gave to Israel. 32, verse 32, and they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone as spies in the land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature, they're giants. There we saw the giants, the descendants of, I don't know, Anak. Who did I hear up there? Is that Rick? Anak came from the giants. And we were like grasshoppers in their own sight, and so we were in their sight. So we have a knock, and then we go back to Joshua 11, and we have Joshua came and cut off the Anakim from the mountains, from Hebron. We have this region here, verse 22. None of the Anakim were left in the land of the children of Israel. They remained only in Gaza and Gath and in Ashdod. So Joshua took the whole land according to all the Lord had said to Moses, and Joshua gave it as an inheritance to Israel according to their divisions by their tribes. Then the land, here is that phrase I referred to at the beginning of the chapter before we got into it. It seems very bloody up to this point, and it has been. They've conquered land or city after city after city. They're conquering the land that God's giving them. And then we have this phrase at the very end of our chapter 11. Originally, it wasn't divided, but there you have, then the land rested from war. And that's chapter 11. Any questions? Comments? Other than they were pagans, I don't know what else someone would suggest. But they were pagans. That's why all these nations are being wiped out from the land. Do you have another thought? Was that it? I've heard a lot of other theories about. Mhm. Right. Yeah. 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 It's true. True. That's very true. Appreciate those points. Now, if you would like homework, there's some good articles. There's one by Wayne Jackson. I don't know if you're familiar with Wayne Jackson. He has a website, Christian Courier. Did a lot of writing. I have a lot of books from Wayne Jackson. That was probably one of his best. He was a preacher, but he was a prolific writer. He's got some articles, and one of the articles that I pulled up and have saved, and I have it right here before me, it's a small one, but he discusses how archaeologists have excavated in the 1950s and in the 60s cities in this region that they claim to be the cities that Joshua destroyed, one of them being that these archaeologists claim that they've found the city of Hazor that Joshua burned, destroyed, found the rubble. I don't know if that's true, but it's interesting. Something to see, something to read about if they truly have unearthed some of these older cities. I don't know, but there's some articles from good brethren in in the church out there on that. Just something to think about. I have 5 minutes, and chapter 12 is not really a chapter that I'm going to spend a lot of time on, because it's just a summary of kings that Moses had conquered and kings that Joshua had conquered. And so you have a lot of names here. You have kings of Sihon and Og and their territory, and a description of that. And so next week I may pick up here very briefly and just maybe show a comparison, or maybe I'll have something that summarizes the information. It's not really a chapter that you go verse by verse perhaps and detail everything. It's good to know the information, not saying that, but we have about 4 minutes, so just think about a couple of things, and then we'll pick up chapter 12 next week. Verse 1, chapter 12, these are the kings of the land whom the children of Israel defeated, and whose land they possessed on the other side of the Jordan. And so when Joshua, most of the time when the Bible, but Joshua, when Joshua uses the phrase the other side of the Jordan, he's referring to the eastern side of the Jordan. The other side is always usually the eastern side of the Jordan. When he says a phrase like this side of the Jordan, that's the western side of the Jordan. So notice that phrase being used here. These are the kings of the land whom the children of Israel defeated, and whose land they possessed on the other eastern side of the Jordan toward the rising of the sun. Well, there you go. That's how you know it's the eastern. From the river, and so you have a lot of terrain mentioned here, mountains, rivers. You have Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon and ruled half of Gilead, right? So you have descriptions here. You have kings and lands and territories. Verse 4, the other king, so these are kings conquered by Moses on the eastern side of the Jordan. The other king was Og, king of Bashan, and his territory, who was of the remnant of the giants who dwelt in, and so there again you have more land, territory, dwelt in these cities and ruled this territory. But then you have, notice verse 5, and reigned over Mount Hermon. And then at the latter part you have as far as the border of the Geshurites and the, I don't know that, and over half of Gilead to the border of Sihon, king of Heshbon, right? So we just have territory here. Verse 6, these Moses, the servant of the Lord, and the children of Israel had conquered, and Moses, the servant of the Lord, had given it as a possession to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half of the tribe of Manasseh. Now we have that those tribes, those 2.5 tribes, stayed on the eastern side of the Jordan. And so that's what you have here. You have their land, you have a description of it, you have the kings who once ruled over it. Moses and Joshua and Israel conquered them, destroyed them, and then this is the land that is now possessed by Reuben, his tribe, Gad, his tribe, and half of a tribe, the tribe of Manasseh. 2 minutes left. Verse 7, the rest of the chapter, kings that Joshua conquered. And these are the kings of the country which Joshua and the children of Israel conquered on this side of the Jordan. So there you have that phrase, not the other side. Now you have this side. So this is the western side, which he says there, on this side of the Jordan, on the west, from Baal Gad in the valley of Lebanon as far as the mount, right? So you just have territory here. You have king after king after king after king after king. You have tons of kings named here. The king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of, you just have king after king after king, all the way to verse 24. And so chapter 12, I'm actually not going to pick up there next week. We have 1 minute left, and that's chapter 12. You have a summary of the kings that Moses conquered on the east side of the Jordan. You have a summary of the kings that Joshua conquered on the west side of the Jordan. And chapter 13 is going to start the land division. And that's probably the most boring part of the book of Joshua. It's all the land being divided, the tribes, and who gets what. But it's 9:45. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Hey, there it is. Where's the TV remote? Oh. Well, there you go.